Hey all, Charlton here. Aren't video games just the greatest? If we cast our minds back to 2023, the roster of titles on offer that year really cemented it in the eyes of many people as one of the strongest years the medium has seen in a long time. I mean, think for a second. Resident Evil 4 Remake, Tears of the Kingdom, Baldur's Gate 3, Hi-Fi fucking Rush, Skull Island Rise of Kong. But they're in the AAA realm. There were even more heavy hitters who decided to take a walk through Indie Town. And whilst we're on the topic of indies, let's talk indie platformers, shall we? A lot of people like to say that this genre is one that's gone out of fashion, but that just isn't true. There's all sorts of games releasing in this genre and they're still mainstream in the AAA realms. However, a lot of AAA platformers these days come from established IPs. Your Marios, Crashes, Sonics, Ratchet & Clanks, Spyros, etc. These are characters that have been floating around the gaming zeitgeist for decades. Even more recently with Astrobot, a game that was universally acclaimed for being an actual video game on the PlayStation 5, is part of an established IP. Of course, these games aren't bad by any means. Most of them are critically acclaimed. Heck, if I had 450 quid that could willing to exist with the snap of my fingers, I'd currently be having a whirl of a time rescuing PlayStation Club shitos. But alas, I'm not built for magic. I tried using magic once. Let's just say I'm never doing that again. Bad idea. But if you don't want to see the same old faces lead this particular genre, that's where indie games descend from the heavens to offer players new characters and more out there experiences. We've arrived at the door for the subject of today's episode. I want to have a chat with you about a certain indie platform from 2023 that's caught my interest as of late. You might have heard of it. It's in that weird limbo territory of indie games where it's not obscure enough that you can stiffen your upper lip in discourse about it whilst drinking a glass of wine with a cliquey group of fellow intellectuals, but it's also not popular enough for it to be a member of the Indie Avengers. It's called Pseudoregalia is one of those games I heard about through word of mouth and social media. I remember seeing a post about it on Twitter, or, hell. And it looked like this dreamy indie game that took place in a castle with fluid platforming, and I thought it looked really interesting. And I was just like, screw it, let's just see what all the fuss is about. And oh boy am I glad I did, because this game was honestly phenomenal. One of the things that also drew me to this game was the visual presentation. The game adopts a visual aesthetic that fit right at home on a Nintendo 64. So much so that gameplay of it in a CRT looks like something you could have seen back in the late 90s. I think low poly graphics from that time evoke a really mysterious and adventurous feeling. That slightly junky style of graphics is so compelling because it represents a sort of transitional period with the video game medium. Nowadays, we're used to seeing games with super duper turbo graphics that'll knock your socks off. And don't get me wrong, video game graphics have come a long way, and these games look undeniably beautiful. But back then, it wasn't like that. As hardware advanced, the games were stepping into a bold new world. It's kind of funny looking back at old showcases and seeing how charmed people were by the low poly graphics that nowadays we would call quaint and dated.
Just the speed of the graphics and the ingenuity of the effect was really quite different to what we've seen before.
I find this style of graphics cozy, nostalgic even, and that's funny because I wasn't even born or even grew up in the N64 generation. Being a Gen Z, my exposure to Nintendo 64 games was first through the Wii's Virtual Console, and those initial experiences of playing such games planted a seed in my mind of a fascination with that console and its visual style. But as I got older, I would go back and revisit some of the classics from that console. And recently, down in Indie Town, we've been seeing a lot of games that aim to reimagine that early 3D 90s look into the modern day, and I fucked with it heavy, and of course, this game is one of them. This actually isn't my first rodeo with this specific title. I actually played this game for the first time all the way back in the good old days of February 2024. And that was it really. It just kinda slotted into my repertoire as I did other stuff. But fast forward a few months, one Saturday afternoon, I was bored scrolling through my Steam library, and my mind went back to that game with the rabbit woman. And not long into replaying it, I thought, damn, this has video potential. And the rest is history. This game's origin story when it comes to indie games is as humble as it gets. What started out as a humble game jam demo evolved into one of the sleeper hits of 2023, with the developer undoubtedly emboldened by the fact that, well, it won. No big studio backing, just a developer known by the name of Ritzler thinking, you know what, I'm gonna make something cool. And looking at the Steam page, it has overwhelmingly positive reviews. So, let's see if the hype is still worth believing. Is this game really that good? Or is it just people glazing? Let's find out together. We assume the role of Sybil, an enigmatic goat and/or rabbit lady with impeccable acrobatics.
Back at it again at Krispy Kreme.
There was a look on her face that either connotes that she's through with everyone's bullshit, or she really doesn't want to be here and just decided to rock up to the party because she has nothing else planned. Maybe going into metaphysical castles and doing a bunch of parkour is just something she likes to do on the weekends, I don't know. But I really do have to take a second to talk about her design, so I think it's awesome. I think her gold, black and grey colour scheme has a lot of visual flair and style, and the lightning bolt shaped horns, floppy ears and the small white cape add extra layers of personality, and I think she really stands out in the crowd. And that's not even mentioning a weapon, the Dreambreaker. Riz could have taken the easy way out and make a fight with a sword, and swords are awesome, don't get me wrong, but the decision to have her wield this uniquely shaped, almost sacred looking tonfa really adds to her appearance, and it creates intrigue about who you're playing as. The only part of her design I'm not really sold on is the whole thing about where she's, how do I put this? Going commando.
Good grief, he's naked!
It's an aspect of her character design that honestly I have mixed opinions on. On the one hand, it's not inherently explicit. Even if it's something the internet has, appreciated.
The Goon Squad!
It doesn't come across as trying to unnecessarily sexualise her, and therefore you can very easily give it the benefit of the doubt. But on the other, it just feels, to put it one way, like a design is missing something, you know? Fortunately, if you're not into that look, the dev has you covered. You can opt to play with an alternative default appearance, which sees Sybil don baggy trousers. And if you ask me, I think this makes for a much better character design overall. The full black outfit with the small golden shin guards at the bottom works really well with gold pieces on her vest to create a really sleek outfit. And when you combine that with her aforementioned anthro-anatomy and her tonfa, it really adds up to create a really cool and unique character design that has a decent amount going on, but certainly doesn't feel over-designed. She's simultaneously quite layered as a design, but her outfit, eyelet animation and the fact that she's rendered in a more low-poly look gives her a more stoic and reserved air, contrasted by the vibrance and cartoonishness of other platform characters. But I think that works to her advantage. She may be dripped out, but she's not here to mosey around. She's here to sort shit out. She wanders the world of dreams, freeing people from their mental ruts. At the very least I assume that's what the deal is, judging by the ending. Spoiler alert. More on that later. We join her as she arrives at a different dreamscape, a castle, and there's a struggling soul up in a tower that needs our help, taking the form of a princess. So, we're on a mission. Lock in to help someone else lock in. The game takes the approach of a Metroidvania in its progression. There's no hand-holding. You're plopped into a sprawling, interconnected, labyrinthine environment with an end goal in mind, defeating the princess and locating 5 keys used to open a door. But as far as finding said keys and finding your way about the castle, you're all on your own. I can respect this style of game design. While there are hints as to where the keys are, they're purposely vague, and the way to uncover them is entirely up to you to discover.
What do you mean?
It's all about how the player intuits the environment, and I think the game has a very dignified way of respecting your intelligence. Though, that being said, I remember the first time I played this game, I remember getting lost a lot because there was no map, and being completely honest, the game's simplistic art style makes a lot of rooms look very similar.
Stop acting like you know the way ahead, like you know the rules. There are no rules, man. We're lost.
However, this was addressed in a map update since I first played the game that gives you more of a clear idea as to where things are. But I still think it could do with a little more details, like maybe detail which areas are sealed off by locks or a "you are here" icon that more clearly spells out where in the room you are. But hey, at least it's here. It also has that classic Metroidvania shtick of slowly but surely making your character stronger on the way to the endgame. As you make your way through the castle, you gradually learn more abilities and upgrade Sybil's attack power. Your moveset grows from a weak and limited run and jump to a boundless and multifaceted display of slides, wall kicks, flips and ground pounds. You could even glide across walls, bounce off of enemies, and break previously indestructible barriers. It's a very satisfying power creep. If you know me, you'll know I'm a big Mario fan. I love the Mario series, especially the 3D ventures, and entries like 64 and Odyssey have always really stood out to me, because not only are they really awesome games bursting with charm, but because of how multifaceted and refined their movesets are. I've got nothing against linear platformers. There's boatloads of things you can do in a linear side-scrolling format in a platformer, don't get me wrong, but the platformers that wish to make you toy around with a multifaceted movement system are arguably more compelling. Pseudoregalia follows that design philosophy very closely. Sybil's moveset is a lot like an onion, with subsequent playthroughs allowing you to peel back the layers and discover more and more ways to employ it, making the game very replayable. There's such a degree of freedom in how you want to go about executing platforming challenges, and there's no set solution to any given obstacle. You waltz into a room, look at what moves you have at your disposal currently, put that thinking cap on, and try to get there in whatever way you can. And simultaneously, it's very intuitive, having this easy to learn, hard to master quality to it. Sure, it may seem a little overwhelming having all these moves, but you gradually acquire them, and they're all very well telegraphed and programmed. If you have any kind of experience with a platformer, you'll settle in quick, but mechanically, it's deep enough to really make some wacky things happen. In a sense, it almost feels like you're breaking the game. Like, get this, there's moments where you may need to use a certain ability to reach an area that's a little more out of the way, but through clever utilization of the wall kick and a backflip, you can make it. There's also this part here. What you're supposed to do is do this little platforming challenge that involves bouncing off of objects and firing yourself through bubbles to get an upgrade that loops back around to the beginning, but I don't want to do that, I'm Sybil, I make my own rules. I'll just do this.
Oh, come on! You gotta admit this is cool!
Or this moment here. What you're supposed to do is keep climbing up this dungeon in the underbelly, fighting enemies and turning on switches to gradually lift up a platform to get to a pole that will allow you to advance. But what you can do instead is lift it to a certain extent, but then if you position yourself properly, you can long jump, chain that into a side flip, and use the momentum from the side flip to get over to a wall, and you can wall kick from there, and hey presto, you've shaved off some time. This is only a flavour of some of the more cheeky skips you can pull off with this moveset. There's a lot more to uncover, and it's excellent. Now, let me be clear about something, alright? I'm not going to sit here and pretend that Mario is the only platforming series to exist. Take the time machine that we conveniently have lying around the studio to 1996, Mario 64 was an extremely landmark game that not only influenced many contemporary 3D platformers and more open-ended design, but also games generally, which probably goes without saying. I don't think that's a very simmering hot take fresh out the oven you have to juggle between your hands. Although I don't think Mario 64 has aged particularly well in certain ways, and it's probably not my favourite of the 3D Mario games, one thing you can't really argue with is Mario's moveset. It's probably why you're still seeing ROM hacks of this game releasing even today. Whatever techno wizardry the SM64 dev team practiced in their cramped offices back in '96, they certainly struck gold. And while I do think it would be a little disingenuous to say that Goat Simulator 4 is a Mario 64 knockoff, as all platformers can be traced back to Mario to practically birth not only the genre, but also arguably modern gaming as a whole if you want to go there, it's very clear that this game wears its inspirations on its sleeve, and is inarguably a homage to Mario 64 and other 90s collectathons, with Sybil's moveset evidently putting a brand new spin on the moveset of Mario and Mario 64. There's a lot of crossover between how the two characters control. Side flips, wall kicks, ground pounds and long jumps are all things that harken back to the plumber's first 3D outing, and that's no bad thing at all. Inspiration is the key to innovation, and it's super cool that there's still a fascination with the type of gameplay these games pioneered all these years later, and it's no wonder that both games are havens for speedrunners. Come to think of it, I wonder what it would be like if you took Sybil and teleported her into Peach's castle, navigating this game's levels with a moveset, and vice versa, taking 64 Mario and putting him in this game. ROM hackers, do your thing. But even if you take these similarities, the way you chain moves together and use them, and the way the game feels couldn't be more different. Faster movement is at the forefront of this game's game feel, and zooming through Sansa's hall feels amazing. The wall kick is a move I've seen a lot of people praise, and for good reason. It's probably the most unique take on a wall jump I've seen in a platformer. Instead of it merely jumping you from one surface to the next in a straight line, you bounce in a controllable direction, meaning you can turn mid-air to kick a corner you couldn't reach previously, or combine it with a mid-air backflip to successfully scale a wall or a change in direction. It becomes essential to how you traverse the environment. The long jump, or well, the slide jump is also great. There's the classic appliance of just clearing a slightly larger gap a simple jump won't cut, but you can also use it to springboard into far-reaching slide hops in any direction that can give you more airtime, which can come in handy or even use in conjunction with an air kick to extend your airtime, allowing you to close important gaps or reach collectibles. Platforming is super fluid, and you get into this mesmerising flow state of fast platforming that's really quite engaging. There's truly something unique about it. Honestly, words can only do so much. You've really got to play it yourself to do it justice. The combat in this game is also not bad either, though it's important to say that the platforming definitely takes centre stage over it, as that's not really what you're there for. You don't play a 3D platform for the combat. Or maybe you do, I don't know, I'm not you. But this game's combat, considering everything, is pretty simple, and I do think there are ways that they could have added a little bit more spice to it. I'm not saying give Sybil a gun or anything like that, but your breaker by itself only has a simple 1-2-3 attack, and in my opinion, it doesn't really have the weight that I think it should. But that being said, the combat does come together in surprisingly entertaining ways. While there's only a handful of enemy types in the game, they all stand out, and they're pretty challenging to fight too. Some of them can really knock you on your ass if you don't play your cards right. You've got these chill egg looking things that don't even attack you. Like seriously, they're just minding their own business and I can respect it. Certain enemies can fire projectiles at you can deflect back at them, like these ghostly maids, these weird finger thingies, or these cute little trumpet dudes. And you also have the ability to throw your weapon in the air, and if timed perfectly, kick it so that it careens towards the nearest enemy, dealing great damage. And it's so damn satisfying to pull off, and it's something I didn't even realise you could do when I first played the game. And now that I knew, I did it every opportunity I could, even at times where it felt a bit overkill.
Professionals have standards.
Even your moveset can be used in battle. You can slide around the castle to outmaneuver foes and dodge attacks, you could wall run around to find better positions to flank larger enemies like the knights, or you can bounce off of enemies and projectiles to stop them from hitting you. Speaking of the knights, there was one here that was really small for some reason. I have no idea why, maybe it was a glitch or a gag, but it was pretty funny, so I'm throwing it in the script.
For you.
There's a very effective moment at the beginning where the game immediately throws you right into the deep end in a boss fight against a knight named Strong Eyes, and at this point you only have your breaker and your mobility is extremely limited. The only things you can do are side flip, back flip and slide. It sets a realistic precedent that our noble heroine will have a bit more to worry about than just some parkour, And I think throwing you into a boss this early in the game is actually a really neat idea. It reinforces the idea that this is a game all about working with what you have to surmount obstacles, not only in the sense of platform but also in the sense of combat. This boss is all about testing out your initial reaction against an enemy, and how well you utilise the very small grab bag of utilities available to you. While you do encounter enemies before this, they're trivial. Then this towering knight figure wielding a hulking sword spawns in and you're like, oh shit. And you have to think. You already know that you can use your slide move to dodge things, and this boss's attacks can be dodged. Therefore, it's about positioning yourself to points where you can land hits, striking when he's vulnerable. This is just like one of my From Softwares. This encounter sets you up nicely for fighting enemies later in the game, because as previously mentioned, you'll need to use your movement to get the edge on enemies. In certain areas like the underbelly, the level design gets a bit more cavernous and claustrophobic, meaning you can't just jump around your foes and avoid them, you have to plunge in headfirst and get some grit in your fur. There are abilities you can acquire for the Breaker later on that make things more interesting, like a stronger swing you can charge up, or the ability to fire a swirling projectile out that, while mainly used for some puzzles, can come in handy for combat. And as you give these foes a clobbering, you build up a little gorge that can be used to regenerate your health. Just like in that other Metroidvania game that I'll swear I'll complete one of these days, alright, just cut me some slack, alright? The healing mechanic is a really great addition to the combat system. It's not an instantaneous process, and it takes longer depending on how much health you have at a certain point in the game. Combining these factors with the fact that your progression is tied to save points, there's an added risk and strategy in healing. You think to yourself, do I heal up now and use up all my gorge, arguably leaving myself more vulnerable? Or do I tough it out until I get to a safer place and run the risk of death by projectile dinner plates? This game is very generous when it comes to death. If you fumble a platforming segment and fall into the nondescript purple goo, you simply respawn at the entrance of the room with some health deducted. But combat is where you really have to make sure you hold your own, meaning using your healing ability to avoid losing progress becomes crucial. But where it all comes together is in the final showdown with the princess. After getting all 5 keys, we head up to the tower remains and unlocking the ethereal door. And after all that and exploring and getting lost, I think it's high time we give a noggin a flogging. Once we go through, we enter a darkened corridor with no background music. The only sounds are our footfalls. This corridor then opens up into a pit when we have no other option but to dive into it. This moment is really great because it creates a pensive and uncertain atmosphere. You don't know what possibly awaits you at the bottom. Once you dive down, we come face to face with the big cheese herself. And then, a very energetic boss battle ensues. This fight really puts your moveset and combat skills to the test, as you can only take it on once you've assembled a complete arsenal of abilities. It's an absolute bullet hell of projectiles. You have to dodge and deflect onslaughts of homing orbs, she creates a bunch of weird checkered spheres that bounce around the arena, and she even creates a bloody hollow purple that hones onto you, and the only way to dodge it is to outrun it. Not to mention you have to chase her around the arena because of the way she teleports around in order to get the hits in. It's frenetic in all the right ways, and it's a really fun payoff to the little adventure we just had, both narratively and gameplay wise. She puts up a much stronger fight than old Chump Eyes here. It actually took me a good few attempts to clock her, but I can't be mad, just listen to this music that plays in the background. Come to think of it, the soundtrack and presentation is pretty sweet too. It really does breathe a lot of character into this game's environments. You got the tranquil melody of the library, the unsettling groove of the underbelly, the melancholic triumph of the empty bailey, the jazziness of the theatre, and the solemnness of the tower remains. Music is a pretty big part of how you convey atmosphere in a video game, and it played an even bigger part in creating atmosphere in older titles. And the soundtrack of Pseudoregalia conveys a really neat and tight atmosphere that feels right at home with its Nintendo 64 style visuals. A lot of the music that takes place within the walls of the castle even sounds like it's coming from a sound font, which is pretty cool attention to detail. Although we're not alone in the castle, as there are these wholesome Chungus butler NPCs with strange dialogue, like this one that wants to eat a save crystal, and this one that wants to kill again, and there's this one. Yeah, alright. A real sense of loneliness and decay is conveyed, and I think the low poly aesthetics only serve to emphasise that feeling. Although the game clearly isn't trying to keep it the heebie-jeebies, this game plays on visual traits of 5th generation games to create a sense of atmosphere. Textures have that signature low resolution to them that you would expect from a game of the era, and it twists the signature low poly aesthetics of 5th generation games into something more otherworldly. There's a real surrealism to the art direction, whether it be stained glass windows in a theatre to float in boxes, simplistic rooms shrouded in fog, giant slanted towers in the distance as you traverse a cliffside, desolate corridors with statues of knights streaming alongside them with an equally desolate throne room at the end, or the gentle flickering of polygonal torches in a cavern. It all comes together to create a supernatural and ethereal feeling, aligning well with the idea of this being within a dreamscape. We know our dreams exist, but there's no tangible evidence of them occurring. It all really just invokes a sense of wonder, and the atmosphere is surprisingly rich. It's good stuff. But after we've defeated the princess with the power of friendship and ballistic tonfas, the castle disintegrates into a white void. An unspecified voice gives a monologue to Sybil, thanking her for liberating her mind and saying that she'll find something worth being awake for. And this is where we get into discussing the game's story. Yeah, it may not seem like it with all the platforming, this game does indeed have a narrative. It's a very loose one that only really makes sense once you beat the game, but it's still very present. I could very easily joke about how this game's plot essentially boils down to someone saying, "Athletic woman save me," and alright, I'll admit it, I'd be saying the same thing. I mean, come on, are you kidding me? She carries around this heavy ass ton for parkouring from place to place and grabbing ledges with only one arm. On the Charlton Show, we endorse muscular women, slay queens. But I digress. I think it's worth having a little more of a straight-faced talk about what's really going on here. A lot of this game's narrative is left up to the imagination. We don't exactly know what the story is behind this place, and it's never explicitly stated to us, meaning there's a central sense of intrigue to the game that works well, but by examining environmental cues and other subtle details, we can gain some inklings into the wider plot. We're going into the realm of game theory, and what I'm about to say is merely my own personal reading of this game's story. If you have your own theories or ideas, drop them below, I'd love to hear them. But in my personal understanding, I believe this whole game is about a girl, most likely a young adult named Sansa. It's pretty clear that the entire castle environment is a metaphorical representation of Sansa's mind in the real world. And the princess that we hear so much about from NPCs, and whom we ultimately fight at the end of the game, is the avatar for Sansa in this realm. What I believe to be the case is that she's hiding away from everything, letting everything decay and rot, maybe because of a sense of depression or anxiety in the waking world, slipping further into a state of self-doubt and uncertainty. And the aesthetic of the castle is reflecting that. And to continue my previous thoughts, the low poly aesthetics only serve to accentuate this. The geometry of her mind is not quite as high fidelity as it should be. There's a desolate, hazy and lost feel to the castle that lacks the opulence and cleanliness you would typically expect of a place of royalty. If this were a real castle, it would be no place to hold a ball, that's for sure. And what this represents is the fact that Sansa is letting her thoughts, anxieties and doubts pile up to the point where it is quite literally destroying her mind and leaving her in a state of disorder and decay. The throne room is an extremely noteworthy detail that could reveal a lot about Sansa's situation. There's a princess, but no king or queen. Perhaps she feels estranged from the people closest to her, her family, for one reason or another. She may have fell out with them over something, or even worse, they may no longer be here at all. And I'm not alone in that interpretation. She could be going through a period of depression and isolation in her life because of this, and this is how her subconscious has depicted her mental state, a large grey castle, walled off from the rest of the world, floating in the middle of a void, with the princess's tower itself being even more secluded and out of reach, a fortified stronghold of her own thoughts, where reality cannot penetrate it. She is wallowing in her own thoughts, and the almost uncanny smile her model wears, and the fact that her attack animations seem very ballerina-like, for example bowing after attacking, suggests artificiality, of a false sense of contentment in her situation. She may pretend she thinks this is for the best, and she may view herself as this graceful figure who has it all under control, but she is incorrect. And I think that's where the title of Pseudoregalia comes into play. It's a twisted pseudo image of a castle, of regality. And it's a situation that, honestly, I can understand. My life's been very much in a state of transition, uncertainty and flux right now, being at the age that I am. I've had moments where I felt confused and lost, not exactly knowing what I'm supposed to be doing, and I've dealt with a lot of anxiety the past few years because of this. But I've taken steps to look at things from a more rational perspective, and understand that change is normal, and it's just a part of life, and it's something you can't hide away from, and it's something you have to work with, and something you have to embrace. What about Sybil then? Where does she fit into all this? Well, let's discuss that. There's a lot of things about her that are left unanswered. Her backstory, personal life, favourite pizza toppings. We don't even know how she got a hold of her breaker, like whether it was bestowed upon her by some kind of higher power.
What is it? Your father's dream breaker.
Or whether she built it herself in a cave with a box of scraps. And we can't even nail down what her species is.
This doesn't make any sense!
But I personally think that the safest bet of an interpretation, that she is some kind of spirit that traverses different dreamscapes, as connoted by the twinkly spots of light radiating off of her in the key art, and how the title screen shows her floating through a void, dotted with similar twinkles of light. Considering her PhD in shrewd mythology, this isn't her first rodeo. The things she's probably seen in the worlds of different minds would fill a compelling autobiography, or failing that, a grab bag of talk show anecdotes. She took note of Sansa's situation and arrived to help her out, and it seems, by some bizarre video game logic, our little scrap in that chamber and our expedition for the keys gave her somewhat of an epiphany in the real world, and the ability to rationalise and reflect on everything, and hopefully move forward with a fresh start. At least the story seemingly has a happy ending and ends on an optimistic note. Go and get into photography, girl, I believe in you. Overall, Pseudoregalia is an excellent game, although I do have some minor gripes like the combat and the map mechanic could maybe use some more time in the oven, and you could maybe sprinkle in 1 or 2 more boss fights and maybe 1 or 2 more extra areas to the castle. I can't deny that this game has a brilliant aesthetic, killer soundtrack, and gameplay polished to a mirror sheen. Sure, it's short, but it does a lot with a little. This is very clearly a passion project the developer has been fine-tuning for a while, and that has clearly paid off, with thousands of people singing its praises, with many people regarding it as one of the best 3D platformers of the modern era, which is a hefty accolade, which is one that I think it deserves, quite frankly. It was bloody good, and I look forward to seeing what other projects Rit still has to offer, because this is seriously impressive stuff for a first big scale project.
Someone cooked here.
And you know what's crazy? A game this fun and varied is obtainable for only £5. That's what we in the business call benevolence. The game doesn't waste your time, it's honest to goodness fast-paced platforming gameplay. And while I think it's a shame that there doesn't seem to be any plans for a sequel of this game, as I do think there's a lot of cool places you can take this character and this moveset, I can understand why. As an artist, it's important to expand your portfolio. And hey, the game presented here still is really great. But this concludes a look at this game. If you're a fan of Metroidvanias or platformers, or heck, even if you want just a short little 5-hour adventure, there's a lot worse you could spend £5 on. Ritz, you made a cracking game here. It may seem easy to feel pessimistic about life and the state of the world, but it's important to remember there's a lot of passionate people out there who want to make other people's lives better and create a sense of meaning to life. And there's people in your life that want the best for you too. We've all got our fears, and sometimes those fears can get the drop on us, but you too can assign life meaning and beat that fear. Just like Sansa, you're passionate. And it may sound a little bit cliche, but I think that's the message I want to take out of Pseudoregalia.
The important thing is that you choose life, and then live